Welcome back, aliens, to another live session. Not exactly live, but then we are doing a recording of cloud and DevOps. So I hope you have seen the earlier videos. We have talked about Docker, Kubernetes, and then we have seen the basics as well of cloud. And now it's time to focus on some specific cloud. So today we have Ranga who will be talking about AWS, which is one of my favorite cloud. But of course, nothing wrong with other clouds. But today we'll start with AWS and we'll move towards other clouds as well. So Ranga, what's the plan for today? Focusing more on the beginners?
Absolutely. So we'll be talking about like a beginner to AWS, kind of giving an introduction to what are the different services which are present in AWS. One of the most challenging fact about AWS or any of the cloud platforms is the fact that there are so many services. How do I know which service belongs to which? When do I use what? So the idea behind this session is to give a quick overview on that.
Right. In fact, when we mentioned about AWS services, there's one big problem, right? When you open that console of AWS, you see so many services. It's damn confusing. So even if you can cover basics or maybe important services, it will take a long time. So let's get
Absolutely,
started.
absolutely.
So let's get started, Ranga. We'll start with basics, of course. Maybe some people have not watched the previous video. I would recommend you that you watch the basics of cloud. But still, Ranga, I want to know from you again a quick introduction to what is cloud.
Right. So earlier, whenever an enterprise wants to uh, deploy an application, let's say I'm building a Java application, I would want to deploy it. Right. So first thing I would need to do is to get a server, install the OS, then install Java, then install the application. And let's say I would want to run 10,000 instances. Let's say it's a popular application, right? So then I have 10,000 servers. However, maintaining infrastructure and also maintaining infrastructure over a period of time, because over a period of time, load will vary. Like sometimes I need 3,000 servers, sometimes I might need 20,000 servers. So managing the changes in load, everything becomes very, very difficult for enterprises. So the need for infrastructure will vary with time. And that's where enterprises and also startups started moving towards the cloud. When we go to the cloud, you would rent infrastructure. So let's say I have need for 3,000 servers today. I would ask AWS, hey, AWS, give me 3,000 servers. And AWS would give you that, and you would make use of it to deploy your applications and do things like that. That's kind of a simple starting point for the cloud. There are a lot of other complexities that are associated with the cloud, like managed services, geographic distribution, and a lot of other things. But at a high level, it helps you to rent infrastructure whenever you want it.
Awesome. So that was a quick introduction. In fact, I would suggest everyone to watch the first video because we got a detailed discussion on cloud, and then there were some amazing questions
Absolutely.
which we got answered. Okay, so let's go with the tricky part now. When you talk about cloud services, you mentioned, right, you can just deploy the application, and we have managed services as well, which will manage all the requirement of your application. Uh, so the thing which I used in my projects earlier, it starts from deploying the application, database services. In fact, recently I'm working on blockchain, so we got blockchain service as well. So in general, how many services do cloud provide in terms of infrastructure?
Right. So each of the cloud platforms provide at least 200 services, and it's actually a growing list of services. So it's very, very difficult to remember all the services. Having a high level overview is sufficient most of the times. If I actually go to the AWS console, like I actually have a console for us so that we can actually get a demo for it. So if you go over to the AWS console, like whenever you create an AWS account, you can actually create a free tier account very, very easily. It just needs a credit card or a debit card. You can go and create an account, and once you log in into the account, you would see this service list in here. So you would see an icon here, services. And once you go over there, you would see that there are a wide variety of services which are present in here. However, when I'm a beginner, I don't want to focus on all the services which are present in here. Right. So whenever we are talking about a beginner, probably you'd want to focus a little bit on the compute services which are present. These are basically like they make it easy to provision servers where you can run your applications. If I would want to deploy a Java application, a Python application, I can make use of the compute services to deploy them to AWS. There are also services which are related to containers. One of the, like we talked about Docker extensively, and like once you create a Docker image and you'd want to run it, you'd want to create a container. So there are services which are related to containers. So compute, containers. The next important category that might be really, really important is databases, right? So as you are exploring, Naveen, like you are exploring some of the NoSQL databases right now. So there are NoSQL databases, there are SQL databases. So there are a variety of databases that are present. There are graph databases. So you can create all kind of databases in the database category. And in addition, one another category that I would really recommend people to explore are the developer tools. Like if you look at today, like today we are talking about DevOps a lot. So to do DevOps, there are specific services in AWS which are really, really important. So whenever somebody is starting, they don't need to know every one of these categories which are present in here. They just need to start with compute services, database services, and probably a little bit of DevOps services. And at the end, a very, very important category which is present in here is storage. So you don't want to store data. You might want to create a hard disk in the cloud, or you want to create a file share in the cloud. So those are basically the file storage requirements. And in those kind of scenarios, you can go for the storage services. So when somebody is starting with the cloud, they can start with these specific areas. It's very, very difficult for anybody to understand everything which is present in the cloud. So it's very important to focus your attention on the important ones. In addition to this, I would recommend people to also look at networking. So like networking is a little bit of a complex thing in the cloud. So having a high level of overview of networking and security would be very, very important when you start with AWS.
Awesome. So you mentioned about some services, right, which is very important, compute services, database services, and then you mentioned about NoSQL. And when I was exploring NoSQL, it was quite fun to work. In fact, when I tried to install on my own machine, it was like, okay, so I have to install this software, that software. Ultimately, we have to deploy it on the cloud or somewhere, right? So I was exploring NoSQL on cloud, and trust me, I enjoy it. The moment we just click on the instances, you have your instance ready, and it's quite fun. So for everyone's sake, Ranga, let's start with the basics of why do we need a compute service and what it does for the
Absolutely.
application.
Absolutely, right? So let's say I would want to run a Java application. I would want to run a Python application. So I would want to get a server. So I would want to get a virtual machine. And I would want to get it with a specific operating system, maybe Linux operating system. And then I would want to install my Java and then install the Java application. So you'd want to be able to run applications. Typically, you might have a batch program to run, right? So all these are typically called compute workloads, batch programs, web applications, and these are what you would typically run using compute services. So compute is related to running your applications, running batch applications, running web applications, maybe running even your machine learning workloads or data engineering workloads. All these are some of the things which are important part of compute. However, when you go to the cloud, you would see that there are two kinds of services, right? We talk about infrastructure as a service and platform as a service or managed services. There are two approaches you can take when I would want to deploy a Java application to the cloud. One is to get a virtual machine, install Java, install my service. If I would want to increase the number of instances, I can set up a new virtual machine instance. I can set up a load balancer. So I can do everything by myself. This approach is called the infrastructure as a service approach, where I am responsible for everything. I'm responsible to create the virtual machine. I'm responsible to create the load balancer and everything. However, the alternative approach is called a managed service or a platform as a service approach, where you give most of the responsibility to the cloud. All that you'd say is, hey, AWS, I would want this code to be running. I would want 5 instances or 10 instances. You take care of everything else. That is called the managed service approach. So in the compute services as well, you have both the infrastructure as a service and the managed service options.
Cool, cool. There's one more thing, right, which is just recall function as a service.
Absolutely. So that's a little bit advanced. So let's probably quickly look at all the services which are present under the compute category right now. So if I go over to the compute category which is present in here, there are a lot actually. It can get confusing if you try and understand each one of them. We'll just look at the most important ones. The most important 3 in this category right now are EC2, Elastic Beanstalk, and Lambda. So EC2 is basically virtual servers in the cloud. I would want to create a virtual machine with Linux operating system, or I would want to create a virtual machine with Windows operating system. I can go to EC2, I can create an instance, and I can install whatever I would want. I can SSH into it, and I can install whatever I would want to deploy applications there. That's the infrastructure as a service approach. The other one which is present is Elastic Beanstalk. When you are actually using Elastic Beanstalk, you would see that all that you need to do is to create your deployable unit. Maybe if you are using a Java application, you would create a jar or a var file, or you have Python application, you have your Python code. So all that you need to do is when you go to Elastic Beanstalk, you can say, hey, this is the application I would want to run, and I don't want to worry about anything. So you can go in here, you can say create application, and you can say this is the name I would want to give to the application, and you can choose what kind of application I would want to deploy. So I would want a Java application, for example, and I can directly go and upload my code. So you can see here, I can upload my code, or I can actually deploy a sample application, and I can, if you want, you can even configure a lot more options. You can say how many instances you would want. You can configure if you want a load balancer. You can configure how do you want to do updates to the application and things like that. So that's Elastic Beanstalk. That's the second service which is present in here. So EC2 is basically virtual machines. Elastic Beanstalk makes it very, very easy to, like, you don't need to worry about virtual machines. You don't need to worry about load balancers. Everything will be taken care of by AWS itself. The third option which you see in here is Lambda. Lambda is also another option which is called a serverless option, right? Typically, whenever you'd want to run a piece of code, the first thing that you need to do is to create a server. However, you would see that when I go to Lambda, let's try and create a Lambda function quickly, right? So if I go to Lambda, I can go in here and I can quickly create a function. So I can say, I want to create a function, Lambda function, and you can say, this is the name of the function, this is the language it's written in. There are a wide variety of languages which are supported, and you can create the function. Let's say I would just give it a name as test and create function. That's it. You can see that I am able to create a Lambda function in just a minute. And the great thing is you can call this function 10,000 times, 100,000 times, a million times. The infrastructure would be auto scaled. You don't need to worry about how AWS is provisioning the infrastructure for these 10,000 or 1,000 invocations. You don't need to worry about all that. So now the code is ready. So there is a sample code which comes up, and you can go ahead and execute it as many times as possible. So if you can do a test from here, so you can say, I would want to test this function, or you can send 1,000, 10,000 invocations to this. So this approach of going for Lambdas is called a serverless approach. So inside the compute, we talked about EC2, we talked about Elastic Beanstalk, and we talked about Lambda. The other things which are related to compute are related to containers, right? So if you have a single container to run, then you can use Elastic Beanstalk. However, let's say I have thousands of containers to run belonging to thousands of microservices. In those kind of situations, you would want to go for something like Kubernetes, right? Earlier in the previous videos, we talked about container orchestration, which is Kubernetes. And in AWS, there are services which are related to Kubernetes as well. There is an Elastic Kubernetes service, which helps you to run Kubernetes in AWS. In addition, AWS also has something very, very similar to Kubernetes. So Elastic Container Service is the service which is similar to Kubernetes, which is present in AWS. So at a high level, this would be the important compute services that I would be thinking about. So as a beginner, the first thing I can do is to create a virtual machine by using EC2. I can play with it, and then I would probably play with Elastic Beanstalk, then play with Lambda, and then create a container and probably play with Elastic Kubernetes Service or Elastic Container Service.
Awesome. So when you mentioned about the functional service, right? So it's basically serverless, right? Where you don't have to think about the servers, just create a function and run it. That's quite exciting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we talk about Elastic Beanstalk, like we talked about EC2, Elastic Beanstalk, and Lambda at the start, right? When you talk about Elastic Beanstalk, you would see that in the background, EC2 instances are created, load balancer is created. Even though you are configuring, you're not worrying about creating EC2 instances manually. In the background, AWS is using EC2 instances and load balancer. So you have a little bit of visibility into that. But when you go to serverless, you don't have any visibility. All that you do is, okay, this is the code. That's it. You don't know where it is running, how it is running, what magic AWS is doing, and you don't care about it, right? Your job is to make sure that the functionality is available to your end user. You don't care about servers at all. Servers are there to run your application. They are not the most important things. The functionality is the most important part.
Right. And this for everything, everyone. The moment you think about serverless, that doesn't mean there is no server. There is a server, but you don't have to think about it.
Exactly. So you don't need to configure anything about it. You don't have any control over it.
Now, moving away from compute service, let's talk about the next best thing, which is databases. Of course, we do everything for data, right? Ultimately, it's the database which is very important. So let's explore some database services which is offered by cloud.
Absolutely. So when we talk about databases, Naveen, like there are a wide variety of databases, right? One is SQL databases. These are very, very popular. Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL. Like there
Postgres,
are
yeah.
tons of things which we have played with over our like careers, right? So that's the SQL options. In addition, the NoSQL options come into picture, right? So whenever we talk about NoSQL options in AWS, we have something called DynamoDB. That's the most popular NoSQL option. In addition, there are also databases which are related for big data, machine learning, and things like that. Right? So you'd want to actually run probably very, very complex workloads, maybe access, like you'd want to do machine learning analysis on huge amounts of data. That's where there are data warehouse databases also that are available in AWS. So let's quickly look at those services in the AWS console. So in here, if I go to database, that's where you'd be able to see some of the important databases which are present. So the first one, obviously it's not possible to, I mean, it's not recommended to try all the databases at once. The important ones I would recommend would be RDS, and I would recommend DynamoDB. So RDS is the managed relational database service in AWS. So basically, let's say I have a SQL database I would want to create. I would want to create MySQL in AWS, or I would want to set up an Oracle database in MySQL. Oracle database in AWS. In those kind of situations, you can go for RDS, Relational Database Service. So you can go in here and you can say create a database. And as soon as you say create a database, it would give you all the options that are present in here. You can see that you can create Aurora database or MySQL database or MariaDB database, PostgreSQL, Oracle, or SQL servers. And it also provides you with a huge number of options to customize the database, right? Whenever we talk about databases, it's very, very important not to lose data. If an application goes down, it's okay. The users will not be able to access the application for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That might be okay. But if your database crashes completely and you lose data, that's not good. If it's a stock transaction or a banking transaction, that's data lost, which is very, very bad. And therefore, when you create a database, you'd want the data to be stored in multiple places so that even if you lose data, you'd be able to get it back. So durability of the data is very, very important when you want to get a database. In addition, availability also is very, very important. If you are running your database on a specific instance, and if that instance goes down, you'd want to be able to quickly switch over to another instance, maybe a standby instance. So all those features are provided automatically by RDS. If you look at you can see that there are availability and durability options, and there are a lot of customization that you can do on each of these. You can store what kind of hardware you would want, how much compute you would want, how much storage you would want. So there are wide variety of options that are present when you create an RDS database in AWS. So that's the SQL database approach. So when I go to databases, this is the one which we are talking about, RDS, which is a managed relational database service, which allows you to create SQL databases like MySQL, Oracle, and things like that. The alternative is the NoSQL approach. We always talk about NoSQL these days, and the most popular NoSQL database today is DynamoDB. So if you look at DynamoDB, you don't really need to worry about creating server or anything of that kind. All that you need to do is to go to DynamoDB. Naveen was talking about how easy it is to use NoSQL databases. Here it is, right? So all that I need to do now is to go and create a table. So I can go and give a name to the table. So I can say I would want to give a name test, and I can go ahead and create a table. That's all. So there is a table now ready for me. So I'm not really worried about creating anything at all. I can directly go in and create it. So you just need a partition key. Let's say I would want to enter an ID, and you can go in and say create a table. So the table is now ready. I can connect to it from my application. There is no complex setup and anything. And if there are 10,000 requests coming in, or 100,000 or a million requests coming in, AWS would automatically scale it up and scale it down for you. You don't need to worry about availability, durability, or configuring anything related to that. Everything comes free for you. That's the magic of using NoSQL databases, especially in the cloud, right? You don't really need to worry about anything at all. So those are the two important options I would recommend to explore to start off, RDS and DynamoDB. If you go to analytics, you would also see another database which is called Redshift. So AWS Redshift is one of the popular analytics database. So it's a data warehouse. So if you are in the data stream, probably you'd want to explore Redshift a little bit more. But if you are on the like programmer or a developer stream, you'd want to restrict at the start at least to just RDS and DynamoDB and understanding them in depth.
Awesome. That was awesome. So we have talked about RDS and then NoSQL as well, right? And then there was a bit of confusing when we mentioned about. So when you there was a drop down, there was database service and storage service. So are they different, or storage provides
Absolutely.
something else as well?
Right. So if you look at the whole like database versus storage thing, right? So whenever I have a computer, I need a hard disk to store information. So database is nothing but a combination of storage plus compute. So when we talk about Oracle database, you need to store the data and you want to provide something on top of it to retrieve the data and store it, right? So that's the reason why databases are actually a combination of compute and storage. So like a CPU plus storage in a specific way is what is a database.
Okay.
Right. So and also there are a lot of other databases is one of the forms of storage, right? But there are other files, other ways you can store information as well, right? So one is like on my hard disk, like I can store it as a hard disk, attach it with my laptop or computer and use it. The other format is file shares. Like a lot of enterprises have file shares, like you just dump it into a file share and everybody can access it. So even storage also, there are wide variety of storage options which are present. Let me quickly take you through the different storage options which are present. So if I actually go to the screen in AWS and go to the last part, which is storage, you would see that there are a couple of important ones in here. Like the block storage, like whenever we talk about storage, there are three types of storage which are typically talked about. Block storage, file storage, and object storage. Block storage is similar to your hard disks, which are attached to your laptop or computer, right? So you can only attach a block storage device with one thing. So if I have to disconnect the hard disk from my laptop, if I have to connect it to another laptop, I have to disconnect from my laptop and attach it with another laptop. So that's block storage. In AWS, the block storage service is provided by something called Elastic Block Store. It's not actually listed down as an actual service in here. Whenever you create a server, a virtual machine using EC2, a EBS instance or Elastic Block Store instance would be automatically created for you. Now, the other option is you'd want to create a file share. I'd want to create a file share and share it between multiple virtual machines or multiple laptops. In those kind of situations, I can go for EFS, Elastic File Store, managed file storage for EC2. The other option, which is also very, very popular, is something called object storage. A lot of times you might have user generated content, right? So you might have users who are uploading thumbnails or users who are uploading videos. Where do you store that kind of information? You want to be able to store it in such a way that you'd be able to easily store it and retrieve it back. Maybe you'd want to offer that feature from your web application. In those kind of situations, you can use S3. S3 is scalable storage in the cloud, simple storage service. S3 is very, very easy to use. All that you need to do is to come here. You can say, I would want to create a bucket. You can create a bucket and you can put all your objects, all your files into this bucket. And each of these buckets, you need to give a unique ID. And you can use that to retrieve that back as well. So if you have 10,000 files or 100,000 files or 1,000,000 files, it does not matter. You can store all of them as objects in S3. So at a high level, those are the important storage services that you would need to work on. Elastic Block Store, which is similar to a hard disk. Elastic File Store, which is very, very similar to a file share. And S3, which is used to upload user-generated content or any kind of files that you have. You can upload to S3. You can create a bucket, upload to S3, and you can use S3 to retrieve it back and forth. So these are the three important storage classes that you would need to be concerned about. There are other ones. Let's say you would want to actually connect from your data center to cloud. This is called hybrid storage. So you have computers in your data center and you'd want to connect to some storage device which is present in AWS. This is called hybrid storage. And in those kind of situations, you can go for storage gateway, hybrid storage integration. It provides you with a lot of different options which are present in here. And also there is something called FSX, which is like a faster version of EFS. And you also have S3 Glacier. It's like a cheaper version of S3.
This is the best thing I like about the cloud services. It depends upon your budget. You can define, hey, that's my budget. Tell me what services I can use. Great.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So if you want fast, if you want speed, of course you have to pay more. If you have a, if you want to cut down your budget, of course you have to use the slower services. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Now let's say Ranga, if I want to learn AWS, and when I see all those options, it's quite confusing. Should I start with compute? Should I start with databases? Or should I start with something called Lambda? Because that sounds simple, right? Because you just have to create a function. So what's the
Exactly.
best way to learn AWS?
Yeah, I think if you are a developer or a programmer, I think starting with compute services would be the best place to go. So start with creating a EC2 instance. Maybe start with creating an Elastic Beanstalk instance. Start with creating a Lambda. Maybe create a container and deploy it to one of the container related services. I think that would be one of the best places to start. The second thing I would recommend would be to explore the databases also a little bit. Try and create a RDS instance. Try and create a Oracle server or a MySQL server using RDS, and try and create a DynamoDB table. Play with it. Try and understand DynamoDB a little bit more. I think those would be the two best places to start if you are a developer, right? But to get a comprehensive overview, I think like it's good to start in a deep area with respect to AWS. So start with one of the compute services, start with database. But once you are little familiar with it, I would recommend you to actually start trying to get a broader overview. It's very, very important. Like AWS is like a Swiss knife. Like it has so many services that you don't know when the right situation for using a specific service is. So the most important skill that somebody needs to develop if they want to master AWS or any of the cloud platforms is to be able to identify what is the right service for a right situation. So a situation comes, what is the right service? And that's where I feel cloud certifications have a great role to play. I think if you do one of the cloud certifications, beginner certifications, or the more advanced one, it gives you the knowledge to be able to match the right use case to the right service. And that is something I would definitely recommend almost everybody to consider. Try and do a cloud certification so that they can get familiarized with it.
Awesome. So that was something about AWS for beginners. We have talked about different services, and we did that in 28 minutes. So that was Ranga with AWS, and we'll be talking about some some certifications as well, Ranga, right?
Yep.
So we'll push that in the next video. If you have any more questions, if you want to ask about the certifications, use the comment section, and we'll try to answer that. So thank you so much, Ranga, for AWS. In fact, we have two more cloud services to talk about. We talk about GCP and Azure, and I hope you're excited, Ranga, to talk about those things.
I'm really excited about the next videos as well. Thanks a lot, Naveen.
Cool. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining. See you in the next video.